back, and well, it's been a while. A lot of stuff has been getting done. There was no point in showing anybody that. There's just a lot of cleaning, taking stuff out, this and that. And at the point, I'm gonna start stitch welding the chassis, and so that I can pretty much, so it strengthens by the car and takes the beating that it's going to take on the stages and just competition use. And it took me a while to come back because my first camera lasted a little bit and then decided to lose its mind, and I got mad once and decided to schwack it. And then kind of after that point, I mean, it was kind of boring. Stuff was just coming out. It wasn't really worth watching a whole lot. But pretty much what I'm going to start doing is stitch welding. So pretty much what that is pretty much, it's kind of like stitching, sewing. So you pretty much, how do I put it? I don't know what it really is for welding, is just strengthening it. So a lot of the unibody cars, which this is they pretty much put the cars together in layers of sheet metal to strengthen it. Certain areas are a lot stronger, thicker material, this and that. And they pinch weld them, the little divots. I think I've shown before. I pretty much, yeah, just push them together and pinch weld them. And there's so many gaps in the car. I mean, there's come a long way with certain cars, and pretty much, I mean, the car, because there's so many seams that's really not touching each other, that they pretty much, the car can move this and that, and pretty much in rally it's a bigger deal because you're hitting a lot of stuff, doing a lot of movement, a lot of tough impacts. So you could break one of those, it's a possibility, break one of those pinch welds and pretty much cause the car something to happen if it's an important spot, like a suspension like tower, suspension tower, or somewhere important, and it could cause even more problems, and heck, a wheel could come off. Who knows what could happen. But today I'll pretty much explain and pretty much talk about why, well, I mean, I kind of already did why you'd strengthen the chassis real quick, but kind of ways to do it and the proper ways, and certain areas where you might do stuff a little different. And all I'm pretty much going to do is this on each side, this top rail today, this side and the other side, and tomorrow hit it hard, and then probably, I don't know, probably by the end, just before I start cage work, or right when I'm going to start, show, pretty much do an update and show that where the areas I pretty much stitch welded and strengthened the chassis. But I'm going to move on to why I get, well, no, I already said why. Yeesh. The areas are kind of more important to stitch weld and strengthen, and then kind of explain pretty much what a stitch weld would look like without it, and then I'll show you after I weld one side, because I already got one side marked, so I'll show you what it kind of looks like, a way I would do it, to kind of mark it so I have a reference, so when I go stitch welding, I kind of have a starting point, reference point, and I'm not going blind. and it's consistent. But we'll move on to explaining why. No, not why. Explain how you could do stuff in what areas you should do, and kind of how you should weld them. So I'll get back to you in a second. Okay, so important areas that I've learned, and kind of, if you have any knowledge in racing, even a little bit, just even knowledge of cars at all, the big thing is you want to strengthen, obviously, the chassis so it's a lot stiffer. And in racing altogether, you want the chassis to be stiff, but the points that you want to be moving are different. Like suspension points are kind of moving, suspension setups are a little different in different type of racing. Like rally, your suspension setup will be a lot softer, track stuff will be a lot stiffer, lower as well. Rally would be a little higher, not much higher, but higher, just a little taller, a little softer, quite a bit softer. But so areas like this, so you see this is the shock tower, suspension tower, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty much what it is you can see seam right there runs along, and you probably can't see, but there's a divot there, and that is a pinch weld. It's pretty much being pinch weld, and there's, I don't know, probably a 3-inch gap in between, and there's nothing there in between. It's just kind of open, not really open space, but it's weak, so there's nothing really there. It's really kind of thick stuff. It kind of looks like maybe an 1/8, maybe, I don't think a 16th, but whatever it is, because this is kind of the main frame rail on the car, so it's going to be a lot stronger in certain areas. But also at the top, another seam, and I'll show you underneath. As long as it's not too dark, you can see that, like, yeah, the one that I just showed you is the inside, and it's just pinch weld all the way. And then even the top hat, right, I think that's what you'd call it, the top hat even has a seam and it's pinch welded together. And then kind of you see the outside of the whole, that whole shock tower is the same way, and even more. And pretty much what you want to do in that is stitch weld it together. And pretty much what that kind of means, I already explained it, is if you can see right here, I did marks. I did 1 inch. The first one has next. That pretty much means to me that don't weld. And then that's an inch in. And then the next inch, I'll weld a 1 inch weld. And I won't do that everywhere. 1 inch to 1 inch is because this is kind of a more important spot, because it's holding the top end of that shock tower. So what I want to do is make this a little stronger, a little more stiffer, so that the only thing moving is that coil setup, and that suspension setup is the only thing moving, and pretty much strengthen it. So somehow if I hit something hard, something else breaks, instead of this whole setup popping out and stuff flying apart, and that's a big problem. That's hard to fix. So pretty much I've got them marked all the way down to, I think, yeah, right here, just before the glass-ish, kind of along that whatchamacallit, the hood arm. And the biggest thing is when they're doing the stitch welding stuff, is you don't do one long bead the whole way, and that's not really stitch welding. And you want to do it in sections. Is the biggest thing is when you heat metal up, it'll expand and contract in a reasonable way. But if you overheat metal to a certain point, it'll expand, but it'll contract below that area. Instead of kind of going back to where it was ish, it'll expand but then contract even smaller, and that'll pretty much be warping stuff, and stuff will come out of alignment. Stuff won't be straight how it was before. So you really want to just avoid putting too much heat into the areas that are kind of like this, a lot of thin metal stuff. And I mean, it's possible on thicker metals, thicker steel, metal, whatever that you're maybe working with, but it's a lot harder, more consistent stuff, and a lot of thinner material, it's kind of touch and go. Sometimes it'll burn a lot easier, melt easier, but I think what I'm gonna do is change the weld wire out, because the last video I did the exhaust and it was stainless steel, so I got to change back to regular steel for steel. And so yeah, I'm gonna get that set up, and then I'm gonna show one side that I already did, and do a stitch, pretty much stitch weld it. I'm gonna say all the way, and then I'm gonna go the other side. I'm gonna mark it out, and I'm gonna do it the same way, starting out with the first one, no weld, then weld, and then so on and so forth. 1 inch gap every time, and that's the biggest thing, is stay consistent, this and that. And I guess one thing is kind of on, yeah, I would say on all the race cars, but really big in rally, is like kind of on this car, the crash bar was here, and it was, I think I got it over here, this piece, and it's aluminum, and that's kind of a crumpled piece, so as including kind of these frame rails and this are kind of crumple areas. So what I want to do for those is pretty much avoid, avoid the beads on the weld being as long as the ones I'm going to do for the top, and the area where I'm going to start welding is going to be considerably back away from the core support area, so I can kind of keep that crumple area, make it a little more safe, but I'm still going to stitch weld it, probably call it 2/3 of the way. But pretty much, yeah, I'm gonna get on with it, switch the weld wire out, and start stitching that area up, and I'll get back to you in a little bit. this is like a couple days, 2 or 3 days after I started that first video, that video, and I forgot to close it out. But in the meantime, I ended up getting, you can't see because I ended up painting them. Did some, maybe you can see better up in here. There, all over the place. I ended up painting it already. So pretty much the engine bay, the front half is done. We're gonna close it out. Like, subscribe, see you next time. Thanks for watching.
This is for everybody out there circling the town square, proud to be stuck out in the middle of nowhere. USA, Chevrolet, Dodge and Ford, raising a little hell and praising the Lord. Yes, sir. Just simple truth speaking, working for the weekend. Every time it hits the fan, you just keep on keeping. You tried and true, red, white and blue. Turn it up, man, this one's for you. Woo!